Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Shiv Kapoor and I'm one of the co-founders of Inflow Communications. We would like to welcome you all to the College Talk series, an initiative promoted and initiated by Inflow. What we intend to do through these college talks is basically give high school students exposure to various students' journeys through high school and applying to colleges abroad and in India. Today, we have Rohan Gupta and Agastya Rana, two TISB students who have gotten into prestigious universities in the US. Guys, hope you enjoy your time here. Please take over from here.
All right. Good morning, everyone, or actually good evening. It's morning where I am in the US right now. So good evening to you all. And me and Rohan are both graduates of TISB, which is the International School Bangalore. And we're both freshmen in 2 Ivy Leagues. I am Agastya. I go to Yale University. I'm a first year here, and our term has just started. It's been almost a month now. And so we're both here to tell you a bit more about our respective universities and exactly what they have to offer and how you might give yourself an edge in your applications when it comes to applying abroad. So I go to Yale University, and Yale is an urban campus in New Haven, Connecticut, which is where I am right now. And I put urban in quotes because it is a city, but the campus definitely doesn't feel like a city campus. There are definitely like sections of the city which are like allotted to Yale, and it feels very homely, and there's a lot of greenery and everything. So it's a good blend of the city and also of the country that you might expect in other Ivy Leagues like Cornell or Dartmouth. Yale is famous for its liberal arts focus. So all schools in the US, or at least most of them, are liberal arts oriented, which means that they try to give you a breadth of an education across like a breadth of subjects, from the sciences to the social sciences to the humanities and so on. But Yale prides itself in that it takes the meaning of liberal arts to the next level, and it ensures that while it gives you the freedom to choose whichever subjects you want, it ensures that you're still sort of exploring all there is to explore in sort of academic knowledge. And so that's seen by the fact that almost everyone declares their major at the end of their second year out of their 4 years, which means that you have more than enough time to explore. And also everyone in Yale in undergrad is housed under the Yale College. So there are no professional schools that you're admitted into. It's just a general Yale College, which ensures that you're sort of meeting people and interacting with people from across the board when it comes to their academic interests. Yale is also famous for its residential college system. So if you're a bit unfamiliar with that, what it means is basically everyone in Yale is allotted into one of 14 residential colleges, and they're basically microcosms of the entire university. And so they're small and closely knit, so you can make friends easily, you can have support systems, and there's sort of a way for you to interact with a much smaller community that's representative of the entire university at large. And they actually borrowed this sort of system from the UK Oxbridge universities, which sort of pioneered this in the late 19th century. And Yale is also very, very famous for its undergraduate support. So Yale is sort of mid-sized at around 6,000 students in the undergrad body, but you will never ever like feel under supported or sort of lost here, because everyone, when they come into their first year, you have like a senior who advises you, you have a college mentor, you have your dean of your college, and so many other people who are always there looking out for you and reaching out to you and making sure that everything's okay. So I mean, in some big schools like say Cornell or something, it could be easy to sort of get lost and not know how to get back on track, but that's definitely not the case here at Yale. And that's partly due to the professor-student interaction. So here, classes are reasonably small, especially in the higher years. So you can get to forge sort of stronger connections with your professors, which really helps when it comes to letters of recommendation and grad school, med school, law school applications, and even jobs. And lastly, I would say one distinctive feature about Yale, which almost everyone quotes when they're asked, why did you choose Yale, is the people. I know that's a very cliched answer, but you will meet literally everyone and anyone from like literally any walk of life here, because as I said, Yale prides itself on sort of making people interact between like really different disciplines, which is not the case at many other universities. And now I'll give the floor to Rohan Gupta, who'll talk about his university.
Thanks. So Penn. So I'm Rohan. I go to Penn. I'm a freshman at Penn. I'm studying CS and cognitive science. So a little bit about Penn. It's in the heart of Philly. So that means that if you go 2 blocks out of the university, you're in Philadelphia. You can explore Philadelphia freely. And it's great because it's just about everything next to the university, and you can freely explore the city. So Penn is a one school policy, which means that even though our undergraduate divisions are split across 4 schools, which are the College of Arts and Sciences, the School of Engineering, the Wharton School, and the School of Nursing, you can take classes across any of these schools freely. That's because Penn really prides itself on interdisciplinary learning, and like sort of there's no barriers to anyone who wants to explore any field. All right. With that said, Penn does have a pretty strong pre-professional emphasis. So everyone at Penn kind of knows what they're doing. They know what they're interested in, and they know what kind of jobs they might be looking forward to, or they know what kind of industry they may be getting into in the future. So with that respect, like we have a strong precedent of sending kids to, finance and consulting industries. And in general, we have ties to all industries. And something that bolsters this strength of Penn is our extensive alumni network, right? Just for example, I was speaking to a senior the other day, right? So she was interested in energy research, and she reached out to an alumni who was based in Singapore, and he was doing some work in nuclear energy. So she just reached out with a cold email, and then she managed to snag an internship, and she had a great summer over there. So alumni is a great, and generally pre-professional emphasis at Penn is a great, it's a vital factor of Penn culture, and pre-professional life itself at Penn is great. With that said, we are at heart a research university. So there's an emphasis on interdisciplinary research and scholarships, even within the Wharton School. As you may have heard, it's a business school, right? So it doesn't make sense that there would be research, but there's a lot of very productive, interesting research that goes on in the Wharton School. And in general, Penn focuses on bringing in the cutting edge technologies, cutting edge sort of theories and ideas to the professional world, which is great in my opinion. So I'll be covering a little bit of statistics. Of course, everyone wants to know the numbers, so that the numbers here on screen. But we'd like to emphasize unequivocally that statistics are correlation or causation, right? So they only matter up to a certain point, and we'd be happy to field any questions after the session about stats and stats in general. Right, so a little bit more about Penn, what Penn is known for, and what Penn represents. So if I had to describe the culture in 3 words, I'd go with driven, work hard, play hard, and dynamic. So to explain driven, everyone at Penn, really knows what they're interested in. Everyone at Penn has some form of specialization, and they're interested in a specific field, and they know what they want to do in the 4 years that they are at Penn, or maybe they know what they want to do after they graduate, right? So with this, everyone obviously is working hard towards a specific ambition, towards a specific goal, and we're known to be stressed out. We're known to be competitive, but we also like to take the weekends off. We like to take our Fridays off, and we like to go out to Philadelphia, go out to New York, have a good time. And even over Zoom, we've had like a pretty solid social scene, and we've been chilling. But of course, if there's a midterm the day before, then, or if there's a final exam, then you're not gonna find us, just loafing around. You're gonna find us in the library, grinding out the night. Right. So with that said, I mean, everyone at Penn is definitely, I'd say, dynamic in the aspect that everyone at Penn is really interested in something interdisciplinary of some sort. So one of my good friends, actually a senior friend, is studying computer science and English together. So he's interested in English literature and how we can use CS and the intersection of the two. So those may seem like a very eccentric combination, but it's truly resonant with Penn's spirit of interdisciplinarity and sort of focusing on breadth of curriculum, right? So with that said, some popular majors at Penn are finance, economics, CS, and biology. So these are, classical pre-professional majors, right? Each of them corresponds to a pre-professional field. But with that said, a lot of people at Penn choose to go into combinations of these fields, which are quite popular. So some popular combinations are the management and technology program. So that's a combination between the engineering school and the Wharton School. Of course, entrepreneurship is big here because there's a lot of Wharton kids interested in business, in entrepreneurship. CS in cognitive science is another dual degree program and a dual major program offered at Penn, which is recently growing in popularity, and it's something that I'm interested in as well. And of course, you have PPE, which is a take on Oxford's popular, which seeks to combine these three fields in a single degree program. All right. So of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Wharton and if I didn't expand upon Wharton, which is perhaps the Penn's flagship school. So Wharton is the hub of anything business related at Penn, but many people seem to associate Wharton with people in stuffy suits, and that's not really the case, right? It's really a very interdisciplinary place. It's very research oriented, and Wharton really focuses on being at the forefront of everything in the related business world. So some examples include, we have the Wharton AI for Business initiative that's recently been growing in popularity. So that's something that's in partnership with the engineering school. And we also have the Wharton Neuroscience initiative that seeks to use neuroscience, consumer psychology, behavioral psychology ideas in business decisions, right? So along those lines, since people at Penn are definitely interested in this business aspect, people at Penn are definitely interested in the pre-professional aspect, there's a lot of students who do dual degrees, and it's definitely a viable option to do so with Wharton. Another thing that Penn prides itself on is great guest speakers and sort of resources that we have. So I think it is best exemplified by especially this talk that I'm looking forward to on Tuesday. So we have Rajiv Mishra, who's the CEO of SoftBank, which is an investment advisory company, and he manages collectively assets of over $100 billion for venture capital, right? So he's obviously an industry leader, and he's definitely going to be a speaker that people are looking forward to. And the sign-up count for that speaker is over 300 at this point. So everyone at Penn, like, who's interested in remotely anything related to fintech or venture capital is going there. So Penn sort of prides itself on meeting these speakers, learning from them, and even networking with them. So that's something that we consider as important. Another thing that's vital to Penn is our clubs, right? So clubs at Penn are different from clubs in high school or clubs at some other colleges. So clubs at Penn are usually competitive. So this is because clubs at Penn usually do real world things. So one of the clubs I'm involved in, Penn Labs, we develop apps that benefit the Penn community. So this is on web and mobile. So one of the things that we've developed is Penn Mobile. So what that does is, what that has is, well, first of all, it's contact tracing for COVID. And it tells you anything related to Penn, right? So if you want to know which dining hall is open, you can check on the app. You can check which laundry machines are free on which floors as well. You just about anything related to Penn life is something that we work for. So that clubs are not just casual interest groups, but they actually do real world work. And this is even more true in finance and consulting clubs. Next, I'd like to speak about Philadelphia and proximity to NYC. So location is obviously important, right? Penn is on the East Coast, so it definitely has ties to NYC. And we're just 1 hour by train to NYC, and it's a common weekend getaway to perhaps take a corporate trek to NYC, some of the tech companies in NYC, some of the finance companies in NYC, or just spend a good weekend out with friends at NYC. Another thing at Penn that sort of is important for the social culture is Greek life. So Greek life is it's a collection of fraternities and sororities at Penn, which are brotherhood and sisterhood organizations respectively, and these are deeply rooted in tradition. And Penn sort of values this aspect of social life, and it's a great way to get to know people. It's a great way to network with people, especially who have similar interests, values as you, and people who are going to be lifelong friends likely. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Agastya to describe Yale.
All right. So I think before I start, I just want you guys to sort of think about the fact that when you're applying to colleges and when you have to think about why college essays, I think that hopefully what me and Rohan are talking about right now should give you a very, very good idea of what the culture is like at both of our schools, and to sort of pinpoint that culture and see not only what you should write in your essays, but also what fits you is really important to figure out exactly like where you want to apply and how you want to put yourself forward as an applicant. And so we'll talk about this later. But anyways, I should probably tell you a bit more about what Yale's like. So Yale is definitely not as pre-professional as Penn. Like they're two very, very different cultures at Yale and Penn. And honestly, what Rohan just said sort of intimidated me. So I'm happy I'm here. And so the culture here at Yale it's not as competitive as you'd see in Wharton. It's very collaborative. So I'm taking this math course right now, and our professor literally, I mean, he won't say it, but he literally wants us to sit down and work. I mean, he says it too. He wants us to sit down and work on problems together. And we have like every Thursday, we have like a 4-hour grind session where we just go through like the entire piece set, like in a group of 5 and 6, and we sort of help each other out and give each other ideas. And it's a very, very thriving environment. So that's sort of what academic life is at Yale. It's also a very friendly place. Here, I can just wave at anyone and they'll stop and say hi, and literally you can start a conversation just like that. Everyone's willing to, you know, they're very outgoing, they're very friendly, and it's always a great thing to be able to make friends like that, because sometimes, you know, college life is very stressful, and this is like a really nice getaway that you can have here. It's also very diverse. As I said, there's no sort of grouping like Penn has under 4 different schools. It's everyone here is under Yale College. And that means that in my daily life, I interact with people who are majoring in philosophy, who are majoring in psychology, who are majoring in English. Even though I'm majoring, I don't think I've said this before, but I'm probably going to major in some science like physics or math. I haven't decided yet. But again, the reason why I haven't decided is because I don't have to know what I want to major in, which is sort of more of the culture at Yale than it might be at Penn, where people coming to Penn usually know exactly what they want to be doing in the future. And so that sort of connects to the fact that Yale is explorative. So you can literally start off, I think the statistic is something like 60% of people at Yale change their majors in their 4 years, which obviously shows you that Yale really wants you to push your own boundaries and sort of figure out, explore in different fields, figure out what exactly really, really appeals to you and what exactly you want to spend your life doing. And it gives you more than enough time to do that. And when it comes to popular majors at Yale, well, I do know that Yale has historically had a reputation for being on the humanities and social sciences side of things versus like STEM. But I think that's very much changing. We've had 2 big science buildings come up in the last decade. I mean, the grants for science these days are absolutely insane. We have free summers of funded research for all my 3 summers actually here. And yeah, so science is definitely a big thing now. At least it's starting to grow. That being said, some common tracks people follow are global affairs and ethics, politics, and economics, which is those 2 are very common for sort of people wanting to go into international relations or politics, which is very popular here. There's also a heavy pre-med focus in the life sciences. We have this major called molecular, cellular, and developmental biology, MCDB, which is pretty much what everyone, or not everyone actually, you can take pre-med even doing history, but many pre-med people take life science, take the MCDB major. That's very popular. And of course, Yale's humanities is excellent. We have stunning resources. We have this thing called the Beinecke Library, which is a library of rare artifacts and manuscripts, which has all sorts of weird items in it. Like you can find many historical documents that can serve as like primary sources for whatever work you're doing. So it's Yale is a place rooted in history because it's one of the oldest universities that's founded in the US. And as I mentioned, I don't want to repeat this too much, but it is liberal arts at its finest. You can do anything and everything, and there's no pressure for you to like focus or come in with a focus and sort of grind at that without exploring. The access to resources is probably one of the best you'll ever get because it has the 2nd biggest endowment in like, I think globally, honestly, only 2nd to Harvard. And we have less graduates than Harvard. We're sort of a smaller school in total, which means that overall, the access that each individual student has to like resources, whether it be lab postings or whether it be access to professors or literally anything, any grants that you want, that's definitely going to happen at Yale because they just have the money for it. They have the place for it. And you'll never have to like compete with other people to get a job or to get a posting somewhere. Another big thing about Yale, which ties into sort of the residential college system, is the undergraduate experience. So the residential college system is a huge part of it. You're in the same college for 4 years with the same around 100 or 115 people in your year, and of course the 3 years of like the 3 other years that are currently in the college. And so you sort of form very tight-knit relationships with people from your college, and it's just a great sort of smaller, easier to interact with bubble of the university. And more than that, I think one big thing about Yale that I've definitely felt in the first month here is that everyone wants you to succeed here. I mean, I have, so everyone at every first year at Yale has a freshman counselor, which is a senior who sort of advises you through everything. So my freshman counselor, he's been so helpful. He sort of guided me on which classes to take, you know, how the social scene is. And then there have been deans who have sort of helped me out taking courses and everything. So I always know here that if I'm facing any difficulty, there's always someone I can reach out to. And so that's a very like sort of distinctive facet of Yale, which I'm very happy about. And since Rohan mentioned Greek life at Penn, Greek life at Yale, which is fraternities and sororities, is definitely not as big of a thing here. I mean, some people do join fraternities and sororities, but that's definitely not the way people socialize, at least in the majority of social settings. So, I mean, there are frat parties and everything, but people, it's a much more chill social scene than you would probably find at Penn. Yeah.
All right. So I'll be speaking about my journey of getting in now. So I think the core 2 facets of my application that contributed were the first points in this slide. So I think my work with the visually impaired. So in the summer of 11th grade, I conducted a research project with a research survey with across blind schools in Bangalore, which is where I live. Interviewing blind students about careers that were attractive to them or careers that appealed to them. And I think the result of this survey was that they just didn't have any idea of careers that were truly attractive to them. They just didn't have the notion of doing something that was appealing to them. Instead, they only did things out of compulsion, out of willingness to support their family, or just to be financially independent, right? So to combat this, I realized that the problem wasn't the lack of drive or lack of capability, but it was really a lack of opportunity, right? So what I did was I developed an application to facilitate accessible access of audiobooks to the visually impaired community, right? So the key feature of this application was that, first of all, I worked closely with an organization that had a resource that had a large resource of audiobooks in regional languages, which was important. And I developed a voice recognition sort of solution to enable these visually impaired people to accessibly, sort of easily access this app and use it in a consistent manner, right? So why I think this worked is I identified a problem, and in my initial research survey, so I identified that there was a problem that like they had the capability, they had the drive, but they just didn't have the opportunity. And then after reflecting on it, after realizing things I could do, I combined my passion for like technology, my passion for sort of AI, NLP, which are things that I've been studying currently, and developed this app, sort of working closely with the organization. So it was a solution to a community problem, right? So I applied the knowledge that I was passionate about to a problem that was sort of pertinent to this community specifically. So in that sense, it was clear from the way I reflected upon this in my essays that I really wanted to combine these 2 areas which I cared about. Secondly, I had this passion project with a video game. So I don't know how many of you know AlphaGo, but so there was this very popular AI algorithm created to play the popular Chinese game Go, and it defeated the world champion on its first debut. So it was a huge deal, right? So people assume that AI was going to take over the world. That's not happened yet, but there's been a lot of similar work. So you have one for chess as well. Essentially, what I did was I created a model to play a different video game for me, right? So a video game that I was passionate about. And this was a computational, highly rigorous model that I worked on over across 3 months with friends. So I think this was a passion project, right? Once again, I'm combining two passions of mine, which was one was playing this video game. So it wasn't just, look, mom, I beat my high score in FIFA. Look, my mom, like I did this new cool thing. It's like I went like the extra mile to sort of show that this was something that I decided was relevant. Me and some friends decided were relevant, and we decided to go the extra mile to work on it. So another reason why this was impactful is because it was all research-based work. So all of this work was rooted in some relatively novel solution to the problems. So these were relatively untackled ideas before. So specifically, voice recognition for the Indian community, and these game models are in general not really common, right? So there was research that went into it. There was technical studies that went into it. And I think this contributed to the novelty of these projects, right? Additionally, I was involved in school. So something that casually I liked was music. And even for our school festival, I took part as the head of department for tech. So alongside a team of around 7, we built the tech department, the front page of 5, so to speak, which is our school festival from the ground up. And those were like the key points of my application in total. So I think the reason why like these things worked is not just because I did them and I was able to describe them in points like I have here, but it's because I was able to sort of reflect upon these essays and sort of draw links between the seemingly different ideas and the concepts that I dealt with, and sort of flesh them out completely in my essays. So yeah, that's just about my journey of getting into Penn. I'll hand it over to Agastya for his journey.
All right. So as you can probably already see, what I did in high school wasn't as clear and cut out as what Rohan did. And that's partly to do with the fact that I still wasn't sure exactly, what sort of areas I was interested in. And so over high school, I was pretty focused into like academic work. I did some research in astronomy. I worked on sort of an app which helps in telescope pointing in astronomy, and I did an internship in a startup that was working on electric vehicles. So sort of all over the board there in STEM, and I wasn't really sure what exactly was my thing. So I sort of decided to explore, and so I guess my application just showed some sort of diversity in my exploration of physics and astronomy and engineering, whatever. And apart from that academic component, I was pretty involved in school, which was TISB that both Rohan and I went to. So I was head boy at TISB, and I also ran Vivum, which is the school fest that we run every year. And honestly, those were like the two best experiences I've had as a high schooler. And those, I guess, are the experiences that I took on just because I thought they would be fun, and not particularly because I thought they would help my college application. So that was school was a big component of my application. And also I was in the varsity swimming team at school, and that was also a big part of sort of what shaped my application. And finally, I think one unique part about my application was I listened to a lot of music every day, and I decided to start writing in a paid internship for a music blog. And that was honestly a lot of fun. I still do it actually, and I'm still getting paid, which is really cool. And that's sort of something unique that not everyone sort of has on the application. So I decided to put it there. And I think that would have sort of helped shape me as a more authentic person who sort of does things that they enjoy, which is really what I wanted to put out. But that being said, obviously, maybe you can tell by now, my extracurriculars weren't as sort of geared towards an application in the I guess the traditional sense as perhaps Rohan's were. And so I think, I mean, I can only speculate at this point, but I have a very strong suspicion that it was my essays that really pushed my application the extra mile and got me into like wherever I ended up getting in, because I sort of took what most people call a reasonably big risk, and I went a bit unorthodox with my essays. So I wrote about some pretty wacky topics, which weren't related. So your essays, you can talk about, high school experiences, like your research you've done, anything that you think is a big project of yours that you want to talk about. Whereas in my essays, I decided to skip all that, and I talked about, you know, sort of more personality and I would sort of say philosophical sort of standpoints instead of what most people write about. So I thought that stood out in my application, and we'll talk a bit about this later about essays. Yeah.
Okay, so for both of us, actually, we share an outlook in the application, which is again why we're actually jointly presenting this. But some key ideas that stood out to us individually. So the idea of uniqueness was something that turned out to be very important in all of our applications, right? So many people, so you hear the common phrase, right? You need to stand out from the flock. You need to be special. You need to do some things that are different from others. But oftentimes, when people try to portray themselves in a way that's different or unique, it can come off as weird, right? So this is the harsh truth, right? So not every admissions officer cares about, you know, your ability to perhaps spin a yo-yo like 5 times over. This is just obviously it's an exaggerated example, but many people do write about things that, you know, people don't necessarily care about, right? And it's important to draw the distinction between uniqueness and just something that's so strange or foreign to an admissions officer, right? So it's important to put yourself in the shoes of an admissions officer, right? And understand, you know, what is it that they may consider unique amongst the application pool, right? What is something that's unique and both meaningful, valuable, something that they can understand, something they can empathize with, something that they can sort of value, and something that they think is cool, most importantly, right? Because if they don't think that it's great, or if they don't think it's cool, then, you know, it's not, however unique it may be, you know, it's not the most valuable thing to have, right? And this falls directly with the concept of demographics. So this is something that not many people know about, but colleges look for diversity. So one of the key tenets of admissions is they look for diversity. They look for diversity in major choices. They look for diversity in race, gender, and other factors, right? So this is a reality that not many people are exposed to, or not many people adapt to effectively, I would say. So to consider the average Asian male applying for computer science, and this is, and of course, you know, you see it all around you. There's a lot of kids. There's a lot of Asian males specifically applying for computer science, right? There's a lot of guys, male guys applying for computer science, right? And this is highly overrepresented in college admissions, right? So if you were to look at their acceptance rates, just the raw acceptance rate for this particular demographic, it's going to be extremely low, because for each sort of, you know, combination of these diversity factors, there's an implicit quota, right? And so it's important to sort of transcend this demographic. So there's 2 ways to do that. So the one way is to be the very best, right? To be the creme de la creme, to be at the very top, to be that kid who started off with extracurriculars back in 8th grade, you know, who qualified for all the Olympiads, and so on and so forth, right? But that's not really a very realistic target, right? So the second way to do so is to have a secondary interest, or to have something that truly makes you stand out, right? So for me, you know, I realized that computer science wasn't something that, first of all, didn't accurately reflect what I was interested in. So I was interested in some combination of CS and psychology. And so I realized that cognitive science lied at that very intersection. And that's why, you know, I thought it would be great to sort of center my application around cognitive science. So not only would that sort of reflect my values or the reasons I liked CS, but it would also help me stand out in terms of just the demographic I was applying under. So that's also something important to consider. The third thing, and this is more specific to me, is that I wrote my essays largely based on content. And what this means is that my essays were largely based on things that I'd done, right? So they weren't heavily literary. I would say that they didn't carry the same glowing literary brilliance that Agastya's essays did, because his were largely focused on personality. Mine were largely focused on content, right? So I focused on the work that I'd done. I focused on the meaning I carried from it, the experiences that I cherished, and how that shaped me as a person, right? So it was largely about the content. It was largely about specific events, and I think this was important. This was a good decision for me specifically because, you know, I had these 2 aspects of my application that I earlier discussed that were sort of so pivotal to what I believed, represented me as a high school student, right? So that's why I believe sort of the content-based writing was a way to go. But yeah, I'll leave it to Agastya to discuss the final 2 points.
Okay, so I want to preface whatever I'm going to say with the fact that to sort of aim for high colleges and high tier colleges, you have to be a good writer. Like it's a necessary prerequisite. And Rohan talks about how my essays were glowing with literary brilliance or whatever. Even his work, he's just being modest about it. You cannot possibly get into like a good college if your essays aren't top notch when it comes to the style of writing. So that's definitely something, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but that's definitely something that you have to keep in mind. And that being said, obviously, as Rohan said, uniqueness is something that you have to have, but most people misunderstand what uniqueness actually means. They think, you have to be extra quirky or whatever, which is not it at all. You just have to have a component of your application which is different from others. And that should, when you're shaping your applications, that should be apparent to you in some form. So for me, although, for Rohan, it wasn't just, it was more of his activities which sort of shaped his uniqueness. For me, it wasn't that. My activities were, pretty normal for a high school, for a high school kid applying to like top tier universities. So that couldn't really define me. Instead, I think something that really put me forward as an applicant were my letters of recommendation and sort of the personality that I brought out through both my essays and the letters of recommendation. So I think that at least when it comes to what my activities were in my extracurricular list, those didn't accurately reflect sort of like the drive I have for improving things and learning things. And I think that's much more evident in the classroom, in school, in sort of the less tangible aspects of my interactions with people. And so when it came to letters of recommendation, I knew I could rely on my teachers and whoever else was writing to sort of portray the sort of more intangible facets of my personality, which I think are more distinctive than perhaps the other components of my application. And so that ties into this concept of authenticity. So I think a lot of people try to frame their applications to sort of be unique. So, they'll write some essay on some very weird topic just to make themselves stand out. But there's a big debate about whether admissions officers can sort of figure out whether you're being authentic. But honestly, I think that they definitely can. And the reason they can is because your writing is so much more better, like so much more, I guess, vivid and just better overall if you're being authentic and if you're sort of speaking about things that you really love speaking about. And so that's what I thought I would sort of use my essays to talk about. Because personally, although I had like a bunch of really, really amazing experiences, when I sort of tried to write about them or when I thought about them, I didn't think those were like particularly formative in my sort of, in my personal growth. And so I thought I would go a bit unorthodox with that and talk about things that I thought really developed my personality rather than things that I've done, which I should somehow draw meaning out of because I couldn't seem to do that. And so my essays were largely based on this thing that I'm calling personality-based writing, which is basically talking about more of the intangible the intangible characteristics that you think really define you as a person and sort of separate you from other people through your unique experiences. And that's how that comes, that should come out through your essays, which I think ended up happening with mine. All right, so I'm going to take off on financial aid and scholarships. So one big, I guess, barrier and something that's very daunting to most kids applying from India to the US is the tuition and sort of the cost of attendance at US universities. And for many people, it's not only sort of something that they should be worried about, but it's something they just cannot afford. And thankfully, that is not a barrier to you applying to many schools in the US and abroad in general, because many schools are aware of that and they sort of have different programs to help you financially and to make sure that your finances aren't a barrier to entry to sort of gain a good education. So broadly, when it comes to financial help from universities, there are sort of two categories. And this is sort of jargon that's specific to the college admissions process. And if you're thinking about sort of seeking financial help, this is something you should probably know about. So I thought I'd talk a bit about this. So there's financial aid on the one side and there's scholarships on the other side. The difference between these two is financial aid is largely need-based. So that basically means that if universities think that your family physically cannot afford the cost of attendance that they're demanding, then they may offer to give you financial aid. Whereas scholarships, usually they don't really consider your needs. Some do, but it's more about how good you are as an applicant. And the universities that think that you're a really, really good applicant will offer you scholarships or maybe higher scholarships than others. So it's more about sort of merit when it comes to scholarships, right? Whereas financial aid is almost completely about how much you need. So I'll sort of focus on financial aid for a couple of minutes. In financial aid, there's these two terms called need blind and need aware. What that means is that many universities base their admissions decision on the financial aid that you're demanding. So for example, if some university costs $80,000 a year and I say I can only afford 40,000, then maybe they're going to say, I'm going to pick some applicant who's paying the full 80,000 over you because I have to pay you money to make you come to my university, whereas I don't have to pay the other applicant any money, right? Because they're paying the full cost. So that's called a need aware admissions process, which means they consider the amount of need that you need to attend the university in the decision-making process. Need blind is something that's a bit more elite because only rich universities have the capacities to sort of offer this. And that basically means that they don't even consider how much money you need when they're making the admissions decision. And so I think that's, it's for international citizens. I think it's only Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, and Amherst. I think it's like the 5 or 6 that do that. For US citizens, if you're a US citizen, you're a bit more lucky because there are many more universities that do need blind admissions for US citizens. There are also these two things called the FAFSA and the CSS. So these are sort of more technical forms that you have to fill in if you're applying for a financial aid. Of course, you can get back to us, especially me, because I applied for financial aid. And about this, CSS is usually for international students. FAFSA is for US citizens. And those sort of help the universities figure out how much money you actually need. And they calculate that using their own algorithms. There's also this term that you'll see often on admissions websites, which is guaranteed. So they might say 100% need guaranteed. So there are some universities that do not guarantee 100%. Sorry. So that means that, one sec. Sorry about that. So that means that they don't guarantee all your need. So it's possible that, you know, you might need $40,000 and they say we can only afford $20,000 for you. But that thankfully is not the case for most universities. Most universities will say we guarantee 100% of your need, which means that whatever need you have, they'll offer you that money, which is really good. And so you should be on the lookout for those things. And as I said, those are offered by most top universities in the US. They always have financial aid programs. Scholarships are a little bit different because, as I said, they're merit-based. So that means they depend on sort of how good you are as an applicant. And broadly, there are sort of two types of scholarships. One are offered scholarships, which are things that you don't have to apply for. So you just like submit your application and they get back to you and they're like, oh, we really want you. Here's like $10,000 in scholarship. Those are sort of usually less in monetary value. And then there are applied scholarships. So these are usually sort of hallmark scholarships that each university has. You have to write separate essays for them, and they're usually worth more money. And so these applied scholarships in specific are super selective. So in your research process, you'll probably hear about some, if you're thinking about sort of financial help. Vanderbilt has their full merit scholarships, which are a very, very big thing. And those are obviously applied. And those cover full tuition. And I myself like had to have experience with that. So I can talk more about that if you'd like. So Vanderbilt has full tuition. Duke has, I think, the Robertson Scholars Program or something like that, which is also full tuition. Rice also has tuition scholarships. USC has full tuition scholarships too. So those are sort of some big names which have applied scholarships that you should really consider. Meanwhile, in Canada, if you're considering Canadian universities, there's U of T or U of Toronto and UBC, which both have offered scholarships. So you don't really have to write essays for them. They offer big sums of money, even though you don't have to put any effort in. And they're generally a bit cheaper than US schools. So that's something that's on your mind, then you should probably consider Canadian universities.
All right. So I'll be going a bit deeper into essays because I think that's something is really crucial to the application. So something that we've realized collectively is that the real make or break sort of factor in many applications is the essay, right? So many people have good extracurriculars, a decent amount of community engagement, a decent amount of perhaps it's research, perhaps it's an internship, perhaps it's something more community service related. But a lot of people do have good applications, right? But what really makes a difference between like a good application and an application that's going to get in on like a great application, specifically from an international context, is the essay, right? So as we've discussed, is like there's two primary types of essays. This is a content-based essay, and then there's personality-based essay. So I won't go too deep into these, but just like it's important to reflect on yourself as a person, reflect on your values, reflect on the things you've done to figure out like what kind of essay is most appropriate for you and your application, right? Another thing is style of writing. So many people, especially those who are studying an Indian curriculum, haven't been exposed to writing essays to sort of describe themselves, or essays that sort of that are meant to convince a reader that they are a worthy candidate. So there's a lot of persuasive techniques or techniques that are lost upon candidates. So it's important to have a general and good knowledge of general stylistic devices to use, ways to add emphasis to your answers, right? So this can sort of be gained, again, it's not something that can gain overnight, right? It's like when you have a consistent sort of stream of articles in your news feed, or when you consistently read books, or when you're consistently exposed to a lot of literature, then you realize like how do you use phrases in a way that's appealing, right? Because anyone can list out points, right? We've done list out points here, but this is not really a very appealing thing to read per se. Another thing that's an important part of the application is the supplemental essay. So the supplemental essay is specific to school. So different schools have different kinds of supplemental essays. So Penn has essays such as, describe your academic interests. How did you come across these academic interests? Yale has shorter supplemental essays. So they have like rapid fire questions on like describe your intellectual curiosities, or describe some aspects of community that you're interested in. So it varies from school to school, right? So supplemental essays are targeted at the school, and they are to be like, they're kind of tricky in that you need to sort of combine elements of the school that you're interested in, as well as elements of your personality that the school should be interested in. So, and there's usually a shorter word limit for this. So for these essays, it's advisable to sort of start early and to design the templates that cover the latter half, which is, what do you offer to the school, or from an academic or extracurricular perspective, what are your interests from a more objective point of view, and then tailor the aspects to the school in a animated way. So to make the admissions officer really think that you're excited by the prospect of attending that school, and it's not just that you're such a great applicant and they should accept you, right? There's a subtle difference, but it's often it's a finer choice of words that makes this difference between sort of coming off as pretentious and wholesome, right? Another thing that's important, I feel personally, is collaboration. So Agastya and I personally worked on each other's essays, and we shared each other's essays and worked on it throughout the application season. And I thought this was beneficial, specifically because it's always nice to have someone look over things that you've done, especially that someone has a good idea of what they're talking about, right? If someone has an idea of how to write an essay, or like how things come across, or how it may be construed by an admissions committee, right? So it's always great to have these perspectives, and like I remember we'd spend some time deliberating, okay, whether to use this word, whether a certain specific word was too long, or was it too pretentious to use or not. And this was nice because not only did we learn from one another, but it just helped us both. So it was net positive in both ends. Another aspect is bad advice. So it's a simple truth that most people don't know what they're talking about, right? So it's very possible that other of us don't know what we're talking about, but I like to believe otherwise, right? What the case is with essays is that many people don't know how to write a good essay, right? And specifically from the point of an application, many people don't know how to write a good essay, right? So if I were to ask my mom to perhaps look at my essay and give me feedback on it, she's probably going to say it's good, or maybe she'll say it's bad, but that doesn't mean anything about the essay, right? Similarly, you can have a lot of so-called trained professionals, trained consultants that do not necessarily have much background in this college application field. That they say your essay is good or it's bad, but it's important to take everything with a grain of salt. And it's important to be able to filter bad advice from good advice. But the good part of this is that there's a lot of free good advice available on the internet, and there's a lot of very helpful forums and resources that can point you in the right direction, right? And it's important not to be sort of set in the dogma of the wrong direction, because I remember one of my school counselors read one of my essays, a first draft of my essay, and she said that she would hang it on her wall given the chance, right? And that essay actually got me rejected from everywhere that I sent it to, right? So that's something to pay attention to. And this wasn't like a school that's particularly competitive, right? I thought I had a decent shot at it, right? So another thing that's important is sort of liveliness and friendliness, right? In an essay, you can't be having like a very drab or monotone sort of style of writing. That just doesn't work, right? If you put yourself in the shoes of the admissions officer, right, they're going to be reading, hundreds, maybe even thousands of essays collectively every day. And this is, if they read an essay that's just dull to read, even though it may have great points, great content, it's just not going to be appealing to them, right? You need to have some sort of animated writing, some sort of a great flow throughout the essay. And in general, like one of the quotes I read in a forum, and I think it's a very good description of the process, is that you need to make the admissions officer want to sort of be your friend, right? You want them to think that you're a cool person, think that, okay, it would be great to go out to dinner with this guy, learn more about him, sort of become friends with him and connect with him, right? So if that's the vibe that comes off from your application, then it's probably doing a decent job, right? So yeah, with that, would like to say that in case you're looking for help with essays, or in case you're looking for help with any part of your application, Agastya and I started Fresh Perspectives, which is an initiative to sort of help you with any form of college application related work. So academic advising, anything related to standardized testing, profile building, and planning, especially if you're younger. So we have a special emphasis on using the essay as a tool to stand out, because we truly believe that within the Indian context, within the context of competitive majors, overly competitive applicants, right? Essays are the ideal and the best way to stand out. And we truly feel that we over the time that we've spent in this process, we've sort of assimilated all these resources in the internet, and collectively we have a good idea of the two main components of essay writing, which is like personality-based writing and content-based writing, between the two of us.
Yeah. Okay, so one big part of what we sort of try to work on in Fresh Perspectives is sort of catering your application to the admissions officers coming from the Indian subcontinent, and coming with your own financial and also sort of academic background, because that's definitely something that's different from most of the applications that they're going to read, because they come from the US, from public schools, which have like a very different academic sort of mindset than the Indian curriculums have. And so I think that's something that you can exploit to your own advantage. And that's sort of something that we try to work on. We also have case studies of sort of popular major profile combinations with what works and what doesn't. And we talk about how some people would have launched themselves to particular universities and why they fit. And hopefully those sort of profiles help you decide where you should apply and how you should frame your personality in a way that sounds cohesive and authentic. And I think when it comes to admissions, you can look online, you can look at any admissions blog, and they'll have things for you to they'll have advice for you. But at the same time, there are just blatant lies that are on the internet, and honestly, that even some admissions officers will tell people, because there are some very I would say, questionable things happening in the admissions rooms every year. And those are unspoken, but those are still something you have to keep in mind, such as like what Rohan said, there are quotas for all sorts of things like race, gender, and everything. And this is not something that's commonly talked about, but it's something that you should be focusing on in your application, definitely, because it's something that the admissions officers consider. And so we know sort of the nuances of what works here and what doesn't. And there's a very big difference between sort of writing an application just as you would to sort of put yourself out as what you would want to what you want to show, and there's also what admissions officers want to see. So you have to sort of find a good blend of those two things, and that's something that we really think we have sort of good experience doing. And we know what works in this context and also what doesn't. And I as Rohan mentioned, what doesn't is probably more important, because there's so many people who are guided wrongly and they just miss out on their opportunity to sort of get into these schools when just subtle tweaks could really help them. And so that's why we started this.
Okay, so let's start with the Q&A then. Let's try to wrap it up quickly because we have gone over time. So the first question is, I'm currently preparing for IIT JEE. Is there a path for me to get into the US?
Okay, so I can take this because while I wasn't directly preparing for the IIT JEE, I was in the Indian curriculum till 10th grade. So it really depends on your age. Like if you're in 12th grade, then the application season's already started, and I'm sorry to say, but it's likely it's too late. Depending on your extracurriculars, however, you could still put out good applications, and depending on your targets, of course, you could apply to different schools. But it is generally considered late at this point if you are in the 12th grade. If you're in the 11th grade, then it is still definitely possible. There's like because you're just starting 11th grade, like there's a lot of resources you can use, and there's a lot of things you can do. We'd be happy to guide you, of course. And again, if you're younger, then it's only easier, right? So it really depends on what stage in the preparation point you are in. And actually, a good friend of mine did convert from the IIT JEE path after 10th grade to the international curriculum, and he did, of course, like everyone struggles with converting curriculum, converting sort of mentality, the way you think about things, the way you have to focus about humanities and writing. That's something that's completely foreign, but it's definitely something that is doable if you are in 11th grade or below.
The next question is, which is the most suited curriculum for a US undergrad degree? IB, IGCSE, ICSE, CBSE, State Board?
Rohan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So I switched from ICSE to IB, and this was probably because I thought that IB would offer me a more holistic education. So specifically in ICSE, in terms of writing, we didn't have much writing exposure. We didn't write much more than like formal letters to like I don't know, the president or something like that. But in IB, we actually had some analytical writing. We had to focus on stylistic devices. We had to sort of refine the way we looked at text, and there was a lot of reading heavy as well. So I would say the IB is good, but it's not just because of the curriculum. It's because everyone in this IB school that you go to is likely applying abroad, and you're surrounded by a community that is definitely interested in applying abroad. And of course, you have the environment to motivate you and to sort of help you along the path. And especially within TISB, we have like specific college counselors that we're assigned to that guide us through the process, right? So it's very streamlined in most IB schools, which makes the process easier in general.
So that kind of answers the next question, but in case you guys have something else to add to it, does the board studied in high school really matter?
So in terms of how it's viewed, so all else equal, right? So you consider an application, all else equal, you essays are of similar caliber, and extracurriculars are of similar caliber, grades converted using an appropriate scale are of similar caliber, then what the IB schools may have an advantage on is the average, because the school ties do matter in this case. So IB schools generally do have ties, like implicit ties with a lot of top universities. But for the very best of the best, like say you're an outstanding applicant, right? You're going to be taken regardless of the school that you go to, right? So on the average case, it definitely does matter, but on the very top end, not at all.
And just to quickly add, I think IB helps you write your essays, and so that's definitely something to consider, because I guess your sense of how to write and how to sort of frame things will be sort of a bit better if you take the IB.
The next question is, how does one pick which activities to mention and which to drop while filling out the activity sections of applications?
Sure, I can take this. So, so there's 10 spots to fill in your application, and if you have more than 10 activities that are meaningful to you, then well, I'd say you're already in a good start. But more importantly, to rank them is simply to just go by how meaningful they are to you. A weighted sum of how meaningful they are to you, as well as how much they convey about you, right? So again, you could be the world's best yo-yo swinger, but that's not something that an application committee would consider very, very meaningful, right? So something that you obviously you need to have some sort of balance, and you can do so by sort of looking at what your essays reflect. You can look at what kind of personality you're putting forward, and in general just rank them in that order. But yeah, it's simply just ranking them in an order that's most beneficial to you.
Okay, the next question is, how important were your academic results in the larger scheme of things, specifically in relation to the acceptance of admission into the two schools?
Yeah, sure, I can take this. So also quickly about the previous question, I think that's something that we both struggle with when it comes to picking activities, and that's something you can probably approach us about, and we'll probably be able to help you a bit more about that. Coming to academics, so I think if you do enough research, you'll probably realize, as have we, that academics are not a defining feature. They are a prerequisite to sort of be admitted into top tier schools. And so good academics are necessary, but they're not sufficient. And I say this when I say academics, I mean both your predicted grades. So whichever board you're doing, your sort of what you're getting in school, and also your standardized testing, your SATs or ACT, whatever. Those two form like the bulk of what people consider when they consider your scores or whatever. There are also things like APs and other sort of tests you can take which sort of contribute to your academics, but those are less important. And sometimes those can put yourself forward, because there are things like the AMC, which is like the math competition, which if you score really well on, that can be a defining trait of your application. But when you consider academics like how it's traditionally meant, which is your GPA or your grades and your standardized scores, then they are prerequisite, but they're not sufficient.
Moving on to the next question. How many months or years do you think one would require for the entire decision-making and application process?
Okay, so I think this is probably one advantage of the school we went to. They sort of streamlined the timeline for us to sort of think about things. What we would generally recommend is that if you are applying in, say, December of this year is when your regular decisions applications go out, then we would have recommended that, I would say, through the first half of the year, starting in maybe January or February to sort of May, you figure out colleges and you sort of explore what colleges you think you're liking, what sort of personality traits you think match with which colleges, whether you want a big school, a small school, or you want a rural school, a city school, that kind of stuff. And then over the summer, you should have sort of start thinking about your Common App topics, which is like the general essay you write, sort of brainstorming about your personality, what you can write about, what activities you can put. And then from around now till December, it's all about writing your essays and figuring out sort of what topics you want to focus on, what topics are really meaningful to you, and how you think you can craft your best application.
What's your opinion on the impact of COVID-19 on the acceptance rates?
Yeah, so I can take this. So, long story short, it's unpredictable, really. But we have good reason to believe that it's going to be negative, right? So, not only have colleges gone test optional, but there seems to be the case that a lot of students from this year are taking gap years, right? So, I heard from a friend that from the Stanford admitted class of 2024, around 10 out of 15 students took a gap year, right? So this means that 10 out of students are in the class of 2025. And this could be the case. This could be limiting because, as I said before, there are implicit international quotas. So either what we could see is, very few wait lists, right? Because, they'll never have to use the wait list, or, just generally fewer admissions. But it's really unpredictable, right? Because with any top school, it's difficult to say how admission is going to go. As always, if you're a good candidate and you put your best foot forward, things should work out. But again, it's difficult to say in these times. The only sort of consolation I might offer is that schools may, I've heard that some schools may offer sort of a deferred admission program. So like they could admit you, but you have to join the class 2026 or something of that sort. So yeah.
Okay, the next question is a quick one. Did you guys have an external counselor other than the ones at TISB?
I did not. Rohan did, but he hardly used it, and he didn't consider it all too helpful. And sort of the line of thinking that we're trying to go with through our process is that you definitely don't need one, as long as you have someone who you can rely on to sort of help you, who's knowledgeable about the process. So personally, I didn't have someone who was a counselor. I had Rohan and myself, and we both knew quite a bit about the process. So I think that was good enough for me. And so you can approach us, or you can do your own reading, and that should really help you. You don't need a counselor at all.
Rohan, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of how much I use my external counselor, let me just say that she doesn't know where I applied to, like the list, right? She just knows that I got into Penn, right? So that should give you a good idea of how much I used her and how valuable I thought she was. Yeah, she didn't read any of my essays other than the essays I submitted for Penn, which were early essays. And in general, I would say external counselors, they're either too expensive. The ones that are really good are super expensive, or the ones that are not as great are definitely not worth for. They're still expensive, but they're not that great. So they're generally not worth.
Okay, moving on to the next question then. Any advice on finding research opportunities?
Okay, so I can speak about this because I did some research. So I think the key idea with research is to have something that you want to research beforehand, right? So you need to have an idea of something that you want to do. So what I wanted to do is do something in the field of NLP, right? So thankfully, I knew people who had math and CS backgrounds, so I could speak to about this and sort of learn a little more from them. But in general, the best way to do so is to just cold email professors, right? There's no better way to do so. Either, of course, you leverage your parents' contacts and try to get in touch with a professor, or otherwise you cold email people, right? There's a lot of people who do research internships at IISc. There's a lot of biological research that goes on in Bangalore specifically. In terms of the other hard sciences, perhaps math, physics, these are harder to come by, like pure research opportunities, but there's still centers where you can go to, you can sign up and then develop your network and sort of find like concrete opportunities in there. We'd be happy to discuss, more in private, of course.
Okay, adding more to the research question, are you at a disadvantage if you haven't done much research?
Again, so this like really depends on what you're applying on, right? So if you're applying under like a public policy major, right? So it's not really expected that you do a lot of research. It's expected that you do, a lot of engagement with community. Perhaps you participate in local election, those kinds of things, right? If you're talking about STEM specifically, then research, given the context, it's something that is definitely greatly beneficial to your application, right? It definitely shows that you have like some skill, definitely shows that you have some genuine passion and commitment, right? It's the best way to show that you've committed a lot of time to that specific field. So it's a good idea to do research, especially if you can, right? And even if you can't, right, you can do individual sort of projects, you can do individual sort of surveys, and you can use that as you can create reports on things, and you can analyze a lot of things, and you can get those endorsed by professionals. So even if you don't have professional sort of support, then you can do it by yourself.
Are there any drawbacks to your respective universities?
Okay, so I'll start. Well, Penn, of course, every university has a drawback, but Penn is known specifically for being a competitive and cutthroat culture. So the idea is that, like, you should always be on top of your game, right? You should always be working hard and doing your thing. And this sometimes does get to people, so I must admit, but it's important to realize that it affects only a very small minority of people, and the vast majority of people are successful. They're happy at Penn, and everyone, the culture at Penn, even though it is like work hard, play hard, so to speak, and it's very driven, and everyone's vying for that job or internship, right? Everyone realizes that they're in the same mess together, they're in the same boat. So it's not bad in any shape or form, but there are cases where, of course, the pressure gets to people, right? In any top university, pressure is going to get to people. So yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to Yale, I guess it would be sort of the opposite. So I mean, drawbacks is a very subjective thing. Some people love sort of being competitive and being like pushed by other people to do their best. Some people don't. So it might be a drawback for you, might not. But I can say that Yale is not a pre-professional like college. There are pre-med tracks, there are pre-law tracks, but there's no sort of here you're doing things because you because you think they're going to help you in your career. And so for some people, that's a drawback, because say you want to get into, I don't know, like some very specific field, and it early on, maybe you don't want to spend your time, exploring the humanities or whatever, because you think it's a waste of your time. That might be you. So in that case, that might be a drawback. But I mean, obviously it's subjective. And so you should keep in mind that if you're a pre-professional, maybe you should be gearing more towards Penn than Yale.
How did you guys manage the extracurriculars and the academic load?
Okay, so I can start. Well, this was something. It's important to realize with academics that a lot of high school academics is very formulaic. So in the sense that you kind of understand what's going on. You can sort of make a mental map of what's going to come in the test, right? Before even attending the test, right? You understand how you're going to be tested. So if you just understand how the system works, right, then you don't have to put as much effort as you would if you were to like sort of work from the ground up, right? So specifically in our school, we had a lot of resources to sort of collaborate and discuss, and we often strategize on what's going to come in the exam, right? So it was often the case that you could, with some strategic planning, you could sort of minimize the time you spend on academics and spend the time at home on extracurriculars. And similarly with extracurriculars, right? Not doing excess is also important, right? Like doing things to the extent that is meaningful to you, and the extent that is it's beneficial to you, and that benefits your application is good. But just going out of your way to do every single opportunity that you can, is probably just going to add breadth and not depth. Which is, again, there's a lot of balance to be had there.
What types of things did you ensure not to talk about in your essays?
Sure, I can take this. So in terms of what you don't talk about is, of course, like, as I said, you want to come off as someone who can be their friend, right? Someone who would just be generally a cool person, right? So the things that you shouldn't talk about really are anything really pretentious and negative, right? So considering yourself, the arbiter of truth to be, or some sort of divine intellect, that's not a great idea, right? In general, it's very easy to see when you're overstepping some boundaries, right? But in some cases, right, some people's writing style, even though they may not intend it, it comes off as, it comes off in a negative way. So again, I think more than content, which should be fairly self-evident, right? You're not trying to tell them that you are God, right? Because in terms of writing style, that's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more nuanced, and that's a place where a lot of people may trip up in how they come across.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on that, two things. One is that as Rohan said, there's a fine line between being pretentious and being authentic and sort of putting your best foot forward. And that is something that you need other people to review your essays to know, because that's something that's really hard to see just by, reading again, because maybe it's something about your style that you don't realize, which sort of makes you seem arrogant. One other thing is that don't go with sort of popular topics. Don't go with a sports injury that made you sort of persevere, or don't go with something that you think anyone could have written about. Your first time on stage, you overcame stage fright or something. That's something that a lot of people write about. So if you think that it's a pretty common thing, don't write about it. And I think one really good tip that I still remember from like a couple of years ago, someone told me, is that if you give the essay to any one of your friends, like not close friends, just any one of your general friends, they should read it and they should be able to know without a doubt that it's you. And if that happens, then you're writing a good essay. If that's not it, if that doesn't happen, then you should probably give it another try.
Okay, so the next question is, any thoughts on a gap year?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I have a couple of friends who have taken gap years. I think it's a very subjective thing, especially with COVID. I think the circumstances this year were different, but in general, I would 100% advise you that gap years are something you should take if you think that you can really benefit from them in some tangible way that you can think of in advance. So for example, if you're unsure about what exactly you want to do, and you think that you don't want to sort of spend 2 years in college figuring that out, and you'd like to go in with sort of a more focused mindset, then maybe taking a gap year and sort of dabbling in different fields is a good idea. Maybe you want to sort of go explore the world, which is something that you don't think you'd be able to do, once you get into like Penn and then you're doing things like you're grinding at it for the rest of your life. If that's something you think you want to do, then go for it. Because, most universities that offer gap years like confirm your admission before you take the gap year, so you don't have to worry about not getting rescinded or whatever. So you should have a clear goal before you think about the gap year process, about what you want to do. Don't take a gap year just because you think it'll be cool and then sort of figure it out along the way. That's not the way to go.
Can you guys suggest a few communities and forums, online resources basically?
Yeah,
Definitely.
so
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so there's I think something that both of us sort of used way too much, but it was very helpful, was the Reddit forum Applying to College, or the acronym is A to C, so r/A to C, Applying to College. And there's a lot of fluff and sometimes just gibberish on there, but there are some very helpful posts that we can guide you towards, which talk about how to write an essay and how to write your EC list and pretty much everything about the application process. There's definitely a post on there that's really useful. And that's because there are admissions consultants on there who post. There are people on admissions boards who have AMAs. So it's really helpful and you should probably take a look at that.
Did going to TISB play a role in your ties with abroad universities?
So I think this was definitely the case for. So I think your high school helps in affirming ties with the mid-tier universities, right? So the average university is likely going to take a lot of kids from TSB. So if you look at, I don't want to quote universities or number or specific names, but we send like over 30 kids to specific universities that other schools, maybe send only 3 to 4, right? So, but if you look at the very top universities, like our numbers are similar across the board, right? Because top universities look for students over like a specific school that they go to, right? So I'd say it helps the average applicant, but beyond a certain point, it's not considered as in itself.
Okay, so our next question is related to when the applications go out. So do you guys want to quickly walk us through when the applications go out and what goes into the application in terms of predictives and stuff like that?
Yeah, I can do this. So as I mentioned like a rough timeline earlier, but let's sort of play this out again. So you want to start writing your applications when you start your final year of high school. And so say your final year of high school is right now and you're graduating in 2021, right? So then I already talked about, how you should go about planning and like figuring out what times to in the beginning of the year, you should consider colleges. In the summer, you should have considered like Common App essay topics, and now you should be writing your essays. But your main deadlines that you should be focused on are the early decision or early action deadline, which is usually like the end of October or 1st November or whatever, right? And then there's also the regular decision deadline, which is pretty much the end of the year, like New Year's Day. And so those two are like the main focus of like the main 2 dates you should be setting your mind towards and sort of planning retrospectively from that. Yeah.
So applying to the US, the applications go out. If it's early, then it's November, and if it's regular, it's December, right? And most board exams of 12th happen March or June, right? So can you just shed some light on which ones are predictive, what's it based on, stuff like that?
Yeah, right. So almost everyone will apply before their final exams in 12th grade. And so universities obviously know that. They know that you haven't written your finals yet. And honestly, as I said, grades aren't the biggest thing for them. So they don't really care about your final grades. They care about, what you've been doing in the interim. So a lot of schools will have a predicted grade policy, and that's more prevalent in IB schools because, they're geared towards US admissions. But even if you're from a non-IB school, I'm sure that US universities will accept your transcripts from like grades 9 to 12. Just sort of, they're trying to see how your grades have been progressing and what sort of level of academics you are at.
Okay, so the last question is more specific to Penn. Can you comment on the elitism there?
Yeah, so I actually read this question. This is an interesting question. So it's important to realize that at every top school or every Ivy League, there's a lot of rich kids, right? There's a lot of rich kids who are, obviously very, very wealthy, they're very focused on the bling, they're obviously adorning themselves with the top brands. But it's nowhere the case that you have to wear a specific brand of clothes to enter parties, right? So that's obviously just I don't know where that originated from. I find it quite funny, to be honest. But it's not really the case that you're rejected of parties based on the brand of clothes that you wear. But as with any party, as with any frat party, like if you don't know the brothers, if you don't know anyone in the party, like obviously you may not be able to get into the party, right? So that's the only sort of elitism that might happen, at Penn, right? In terms of brands of clothes, no one really cares, right? Penn supports its first generation low income community sort of quite heavily, right? There's a lot of resources offered to them. There's a lot of communities that support them, and there's not really a feeling of otherness or I don't know, exclusion that these people feel, right? So it's definitely not the case that what you said is true. So yeah, if that's all the questions, once again, we'd like to say that a lot of these questions are quite specific, right? So if you have, if you want to follow up, if you thought this presentation was useful, if you think that we're speaking some sense, then if you want to reach out to us, feel free to contact us using the channels on the screen. So of course we'd prefer email, but either contact form is appropriate. We generally feel that we have a lot of insights from this process we'd like to share with you all, and we feel like we can definitely contribute meaningfully to you guys, and especially during this time, all of us have a lot of excess free time, because of COVID, obviously, and we'd like to use that in a meaningful way to help the juniors who are who are in the same shoes that we were in, a couple of years ago. So yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you, but just to give a little clarity to our viewers, you only help with the US process, right? Not UK, Canada.
No, we do UK. So I've done UK and Canada with like some good results. So I know like a fair bit about UK and Canada, and so does Rohan probably. So we do UK and Canada. We don't do Indian universities though.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. With that, we'll conclude today's session. On behalf of all our viewers and Inflow, we would like to thank Rohan and Agastya. You guys did a great job. Hope to stay in touch with you guys and get some more insights into the college process for you guys.
Of course,
and
thanks
to
for
our
having
viewers,
us.
just a quick reminder, tomorrow we have a session with Mansi Kaushik, who got into UCLA. Thank you, guys.